Rome. The year is 1508. The heart of the Renaissance beats here, in the Vatican. And in the center of this world stands one man. A sculptor, not a painter, who is about to create the most iconic image in human history. His name is Michelangelo Buonarroti, and this is the untold story of how a single fresco, the creation of Adam, turned a man's suffering, faith, rage, and genius into the most powerful vision of God and humanity ever painted. Michelangelo was not born into luxury. Born in 1475 in Caprese, Tuscany, he was stubborn, passionate, and fiercely independent from the start. He studied under Domenico Ghirlandaio and was discovered by Lorenzo de' Medici, the most powerful man in Florence. But from the very beginning, Michelangelo despised painting. He called himself a sculptor, a man who could free beauty from a block of marble. And he proved it, with works like the Pietà and David. Masterpieces that made Europe gasp. He was not just a genius. He was a rock star, brilliant, temperamental, arrogant, and often at war with everyone around him. But greatness breeds rivalry, and Michelangelo's greatest rival walked the same streets of Florence. Leonardo da Vinci. The two men despised each other. Leonardo called Michelangelo's work crude and barbaric. Michelangelo mocked Leonardo's unfinished projects and his obsession with science. Their hatred was legendary, a cold war of genius. Florence was too small for both of them, and soon destiny would separate them. But their rivalry would continue in Rome. In 1508, Pope Julius II, known as the Warrior Pope, summoned Michelangelo to Rome. The mission: to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo was furious. He was a sculptor, not a painter. He tried to refuse. He even accused his rivals of plotting to humiliate him. But Julius was not a man to argue with. And so, against his will, Michelangelo accepted. He would climb the scaffolding of the Sistine Chapel and face the greatest challenge of his life. The task was enormous. The ceiling stretched over 12,000 square feet. Michelangelo had no experience in fresco. He had no team. He dismissed his assistants and worked almost alone. He designed the scaffolding himself, lying on his back for years as paint dripped into his eyes. His letters speak of exhaustion, back pain, and despair. He felt abandoned. Even God, he wrote, seemed far away. And yet, day after day, stroke after stroke, the ceiling began to transform. Prophets and sibyls appeared. The creation of the world took shape. And at the very center, a single moment would capture the essence of humanity, the touch between God and man. Michelangelo's relationship with Pope Julius II was explosive. The Pope was a man of action, impatient, domineering, and ruthless. He wanted the ceiling finished quickly. Michelangelo, on the other hand, was obsessed with perfection. He refused to rush, even if it meant angering the most powerful man in Christendom. Letters and records from the time reveal heated arguments between them. Julius would storm into the chapel, shouting, demanding progress. Michelangelo once fled Rome in fury, refusing to work. The Pope sent soldiers to bring him back. Yet this tension, the collision of power and genius, fueled the masterpiece. Without Julius's relentless pressure, the creation of Adam might never have reached its monumental scale. Finally, after months of sketches, anatomy studies, and endless revisions, Michelangelo approached the centerpiece, the creation of Adam. The composition was revolutionary. Instead of a distant, almighty God commanding Adam into existence, as tradition dictated, Michelangelo showed something profoundly human. God is dynamic, powerful, rushing through the heavens with angels swirling around him. Adam, naked and vulnerable, reclines below. Their hands almost touch, not quite. That tiny gap, that electric tension between fingers, captures the very spark of life. It is not a command. It is a connection. God does not dictate. He reaches out. And man, created in his image, reaches back. But there's more here than meets the eye. Scholars and scientists have spent centuries decoding the creation of Adam. The most famous theory, the red cloak around God, resembles a human brain. Neurologists believe Michelangelo, a student of anatomy, deliberately shaped it to symbolize divine intelligence, suggesting that God not only gives life, but also consciousness. Other theories say the green scarf flowing beneath God's arm represents the umbilical cord, a metaphor for humanity's birth. Even the positioning of Adam's body mirrors ancient Greek sculptures, linking divine creation to classical ideals of human beauty. Whispers and rumors swirled around the Sistine Chapel. Some church officials accused Michelangelo of arrogance, depicting God as too human, too muscular, too earthly. Others were outraged by the nudity. Rival artists, including Raphael's followers, spread gossip that Michelangelo was mad, that he worked like a beast, that the ceiling would collapse. Leonardo scoffed from afar, saying, "He paints like a sculptor." Michelangelo, ever defiant, replied, "And I carve like God." But beneath the jealousy and controversy, the fresco continued to grow, each panel richer, deeper, more daring than the last. When the creation of Adam was revealed, it was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Crowds gasped, critics fell silent, and even the Pope, who once raged over delays, stood in awe. In that near touch between God and man, Michelangelo had captured something deeper than theology, the eternal question of what it means to be human. It was not just a painting. It was a mirror, reflecting humanity's divine spark back at itself. The years spent painting the Sistine Chapel broke Michelangelo and rebuilt him. He entered the project as a sculptor who despised painting. He emerged as the greatest painter who ever lived, but the cost was immense. His body ached constantly, his eyesight suffered. He often slept on scaffolding, too exhausted to climb down. In his letters, he wrote, "I am not a painter, I am a prisoner." And yet, with every stroke of pigment, Michelangelo poured his soul into the ceiling. He was not just decorating a chapel. He was creating a map of the universe, a vision of God, man, and destiny woven into plaster and paint. Beyond the biblical stories, the Sistine Chapel ceiling hides layers of philosophy. Michelangelo was deeply influenced by Neoplatonism, the belief that the human soul is a reflection of divine perfection and that beauty brings us closer to God. In the creation of Adam, this philosophy is crystal clear. God is not distant. He is within reach. Humanity is not weak. It is divine by nature. Even the arrangement of figures, flowing like a celestial symphony, mirrors the harmony of the cosmos. For Michelangelo, painting was not just storytelling. It was theology. It was science. It was truth disguised as art. Michelangelo was not a man who forgave easily. When enemies mocked him or questioned his talent, he found subtle and often savage ways to strike back. In one corner of the Sistine Chapel, he painted the prophet Zechariah with a face suspiciously resembling Pope Julius II, old, grumpy, and oblivious. In another scene, he included the likeness of a critic who had insulted him, with donkey ears and a serpent biting his genitals. This was Michelangelo's revenge. Humiliation eternalized in fresco. His enemies could shout and scheme, but on the chapel ceiling, he had the final word. When the Sistine Chapel was finally unveiled in 1512, it caused a sensation and a scandal. Some clergy were horrified by the nudity, calling it indecent. One cardinal demanded that the frescoes be destroyed or repainted. Michelangelo refused. "Art is made to show truth," he said, "not to hide it." Even the Pope, though shocked, defended him. Over time, the outcry faded, and the world began to see the ceiling for what it truly was. A vision of divine creation, unlike anything before or since. Yet, even after his triumph, Michelangelo remained haunted by doubt. He feared he had failed. He hated the ceiling's flaws. He often refused to look at it again. But history saw what he could not. The ceiling was hailed as a miracle of human creativity, a work that blended faith and science, myth and reality, flesh and spirit. It transformed Michelangelo from a sculptor into a prophet of art itself. The creation of Adam did more than decorate a chapel. It changed how humanity imagined God. It redefined man's place in the universe. And it inspired centuries of artists, from Raphael and Caravaggio to modern masters, to chase the divine spark in their own work. Even today, over 500 years later, those two hands, reaching but not touching, still speak to us. They are a metaphor for our eternal search, for meaning, for connection, for the Creator. After finishing the Sistine Chapel ceiling in 1512, Michelangelo returned to sculpture, architecture, and poetry. But the creation of Adam followed him everywhere. It became his identity, his shadow, and his curse. He often complained that people saw him only as the painter of the ceiling, forgetting his sculptures and architectural works. And yet, no matter how much he resisted, the image of God's hand reaching for man defined him, and in many ways defined the Renaissance itself. The creation of Adam did more than change art. It changed thought itself. Before Michelangelo, God was often portrayed as distant, judgmental, unreachable. Man was small, weak, sinful. But Michelangelo flipped that narrative. In his fresco, man is noble, dignified, and almost divine. God is not just a king. He is a father, a creator who longs for connection. This subtle shift echoed through centuries. It influenced theologians, philosophers, and even scientists. It helped inspire the Renaissance ideal that humanity, created in God's image, has limitless potential. Today, the creation of Adam has transcended its original purpose. It is no longer just a religious image. It is a universal symbol. It appears in textbooks and films, on murals and postage stamps, in science fiction and advertising. It has been reinterpreted in politics, psychology, and philosophy. Scientists see it as a metaphor for evolution and consciousness. Humanists see it as a celebration of human potential. Artists see it as the eternal pursuit of beauty and meaning. Even those who do not believe in God recognize the power of that almost touch, the tension, the hope, the bridge between heaven and earth. Michelangelo lived a long, restless life. He continued working into his 80s, designing the dome of St. Peter's Basilica, the very heart of the Vatican. Yet despite his fame and power, he died in 1564, as he had lived, alone, deeply spiritual, and forever searching. In one of his last letters, he wrote, "Neither painting nor sculpture will be my peace. My soul longs only for God." Even after a lifetime of shaping marble and painting heaven, Michelangelo still reached for something beyond, just as Adam reached for God on that ceiling. That moment, the almost touch, is more than art. It is a story about us, about our search for meaning, about our desire to understand where we come from and where we are going, about the spark that connects the finite to the infinite. Every time we reach for knowledge, for love, for hope, we recreate that gesture. We become Adam, and in our striving, we touch the divine. This is the legacy of the creation of Adam. Not a painting trapped on a ceiling, but an eternal conversation between man and God, art and soul, earth and heaven. More than 500 years later, Michelangelo's vision still speaks, and it whispers the same truth it did in 1512, that we are more than dust, more than flesh, that within us burns the divine spark, waiting always to reach out and touch the infinite.